when I try to explain this to people, because obviously even to this day, I still, when I'm telling people like what I do, they're like, oh, like, is that a real, you know? It's like,
Santa is real. All right, guys, thanks for joining us today on the Elation podcast, where we enjoy exhilarating euphoria through creation and collaboration. Today, we're here with Scott Borne. How you doing, buddy?
Doing all right. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Glad to have you. We are in the new set.
Feels special.
I'm excited about the new background we have here. So just a little bit of preference. Or preface. This is a 9.6.2 Dolby Atmos mixing room. It's the first in Louisiana to get certified by Dolby for music and film. So the guy that certified me from Dolby mastered Martin Scorsese's films in Dolby. Which is another crazy story. I was like, how do you get that job?
Right.
And he said he started as a film projectionist at 12 years old in a movie theater and fell in love with movies. And it started from there. I was like, man, that's a great story.
It's a good path.
Right? It's a great path. But anyway, let's get on. Let's talk about you a little bit. Where are you from?
Originally born and bred in Metairie.
Okay.
Right here, actually. Yeah,
all right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. I went away for a little while, college, and tried my hand at some other places and stuff, but got the calling.
Home.
Yeah, got the calling, came back.
Yeah, New Orleans doesn't leave far from you, even though if you leave far from it. It's definitely a place. I'm born and raised here. I moved away a couple times and came coming back and making a family here, you know.
Timing was unique. I actually got back about 2 months before Katrina. So actually,
oh wow,
timing is everything.
Timing is everything. That's right. Well, tell me that journey then, because you kind of came back to get your foot on the ground, and then the ground was flooded. So how did all that work out?
Yeah, I mean, you know, my last stint before moving back to New Orleans, I was in Austin, Texas, and it was there that I kind of had made the kind of final tweak to realize that I needed to be more involved in music in a professional standpoint as opposed to just an appreciator and a fan. I'd always been a fan.
Love Austin, by the way. I went to St. Edwards for a little bit.
Oh, nice. Right on.
Yeah.
Small world.
Yeah.
But no, I'd always loved music, but for some reason I felt like it had to be some sort of hobby in my life, and while I figured out what I wanted to do. But after traversing some different opportunities, it became pretty obvious that that was where my passion was and stuff. So when the moment came and I was starting to plan coming back to New Orleans, I kind of made the notion of, hey, if I'm going back, I want to go back and get involved in music.
Right.
And so, I've made some lists. I tried to target some opportunities, and I'm sure we'll kind of get into the whole idea of this here in a little bit. But then I came back and I started volunteering at OZ in the most basic capacity, and just trying to find areas that I could get involved in. I had started doing some production work and stuff like that while I was in Austin, but when I came back to New Orleans, I wanted to see if I could really kind of synthesize that into more of a career-based type thing.
Gotcha.
And upon coming back, obviously, and starting to get my foot wet and trying to find some opportunities, we have this occurrence that we're just saw the 20-year anniversary of. And so that changed things a lot. It really leveled the playing field for me. I was in Baton Rouge, able to get back into the city pretty early on. And so, I was in a moment where it was just hard to find people. And
right.
So I was able to help out with the station a lot as they were transitioning out of the old building that had gotten pretty wrecked in Armstrong Park, and helping them pack that up and checking on the roof and doing all these kind of things just because I happened to be I was there. I was feet on the ground.
Yeah.
And so I think that helped kind of endear me to OZ in a way that made me or at least gave me a chance to showcase that what I can do, and
right.
Kind of the passion that I would bring for something like that.
And you're helping the city you love too.
No, exactly. Exactly. I mean, as hard as it was being here, I really can't imagine having to take this in from far away, or
right.
It just felt like I should be here.
No, 100%.
And so then through my involvement with OZ, and then also just helping out with some different productions. Back then there was all these day events and stuff like that, just as a way to try to get some community together and get people together and get, artists playing and stuff like that.
Right.
So I was able to fit in on a few like little production sides of things and event space type things and just whatever I could do to help. And also served a great purpose of like allowing me to network and meet all these people since I had just really got back into town.
Right.
I'd been gone for about 6 or 7 years, so I didn't necessarily have the network at that time to just jump right in with both feet. So that was a pretty critical moment for me in terms of just meeting people.
Yeah, well, and I remember those, not necessarily, your events, but I remember those first, like, probably first 100 events that came out to Katrina were very emotional. Everybody was just, it was almost like after out of COVID when we started listening to live music again. Everything was so emotional because
Yes.
you were. It was a way to get back into the swing of New Orleans, just the music.
No doubt.
So to be able to help bring that back a little bit was, that's pretty powerful, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, I mean, it felt super rewarding, but then also just kind of, just like we were just saying, timing is everything. Being back there in that moment and being able to participate in some different ways was, ultimately valuable to me on a personal level,
Right.
as well as emotionally, like having to feel like I can take part in
The
what
rebuild
we were trying
in a
to
sense.
do. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there an event specifically that you remember that you loved more than anything than others?
Oh, geez. So there was like a weekly or monthly event that was happening right after the storm called Rhythmic Roots. That was happening. I think a lot of it was happening at City Park, and I remember taking place in those, and those were kind of like the first kind of gatherings when, like, I remember, the first couple were pretty sparsely attended because I don't think
Right.
there's a lot of people back, and then it kind of started to grow from there, and so that was kind of cool to see. But also around that time, one of my first forays with WWOZ was the first Mardi Gras after the storm. We broadcast from the Backstreet Cultural Museum right there on the steps in Treme, and that was probably one of the most, powerful, impacting
Right.
events I felt like I'd ever been a part of.
Right.
And it really cemented my passion for like, this is it. Like this is what I'm here. This is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Right.
This is what I want to do. And I mean, it was just amazing. Like the Indians would come by and do their proclamations live on air from the steps of, and obviously at that point everyone had a lot to say.
Right.
And Treme Brass Band showed up and played, and it's just that feeling of kind of being in that moment, and that a lot of people reflect on that Mardi Gras as such a special, unique one.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
so like that one for sure, definitely like will always live in my head as that. That was like probably one of the more culturally relevant things I've ever been able to be a part of.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. It's a key part of the comeback from Katrina. So
No doubt.
Tell us about being a music director.
Yeah. So, from there, at first I was just trying to like show up whenever I can and just be
Right.
around. And then from there, they allowed me to start doing
You obviously became part of the family doing all of that stuff.
Exactly.
I mean,
Exactly. But I was, the first thing is I was able to pick up a weekly show. Actually, I'm still doing it to this day. And so that was great. And then after being involved and just around a lot, when they decided to open up that position, because at that point they didn't really have a music director, I definitely threw my hat in the ring, and it was just kind of a dream come true for me. I mean,
Right.
I've always qualified myself as someone who, I don't play instruments, I just play records, and but like that put me in a position to, really not only meet some of these artists who I had always held in such high regard, but also like position myself as a real advocate for them. And, and that's even to this day, that feels like a very important part of the music industry here in New Orleans, is like people actually advocating for the rich talent pool that exists here in the city and making sure that is a viable path for people.
Right.
To continue
Which
do
is
their thing.
tough here in the city. I mean,
No
there's
doubt.
so much talent, and a lot of the talent doesn't exactly know how to clean the business part up of what they do.
Sure.
But we also don't have access to the same things that other cities do. Like,
Right.
we have no label buildings. We don't have, we have one radio station that's corporate but I mean, WWZ is the only one that really, I think is approachable.
Sure.
to independent local artists. So I mean, I just, we don't have any marketing companies for that. We don't have publicists. Like, it's a lot of missing pieces.
No doubt, and I think when you look at artists, and it's like the gig economy aspect of how many of them kind of live is, it can be great, but it
Right.
also can be a super challenge.
Yeah.
And as you get older, like then what is in place to kind of help bridge that gap?
Right. Well, and it's
When
up
you're
and
not
down,
necessarily
too.
feeling like playing 6 nights a week or
Right.
something like that.
Right. Well, 100%. But it's also, vulnerable to people coming to town and
Sure.
seeing and drinking and doing things, So it's tough, man. But I truly believe, after being, let's see, I've been back now about 7 years, but I've been building this, I guess it'd be about 5 years now. Um, it seems like there's a lot of people advocating for that side.
Sure.
I'm on Read all the time about why are we in Memphis? what does the Memphis chapter have to do with us? We need our own
Right.
situation, and I just feel like if we have enough advocacy and enough people speaking up, at some point,
Yeah.
Well, they'll carve us out.
And I feel like, the music programs at the local colleges have gotten a lot more
much better, 100%.
defined and stuff. And I think
Yep.
that's a great first start, because now you're hopefully, you're setting the hook on some of these younger kids who then hopefully will stay around and build and be part of things kind of going forward and
100%.
stuff. So I think it's a multifaceted issue. I know that's not something that just like clicks and it's like, oh, we're done.
No, it's
but-
a generational change,
Right.
And it's a thought process change. It's a mentality change. It's getting these independent young kids to understand how many jobs they have to do
Sure.
themselves, and do it quickly.
No doubt.
So hopefully some AI programs can help, and there's definitely some tech that can help with it. But they've got to learn the process a little better.
Right.
But it's happening. I feel like it's happening, and,
I think so.
and the foundations are great. We work a lot with the Tribal and Shorty Foundation.
Sure.
They've had some great interns through here and kids that are learning and talented and driven. So if we can keep that up, I think we've got.
Oh. I mean, I think of so many friends of mine who have gotten the Jazz and Heritage community grants to like record their new projects and stuff like that. So,
Right.
I mean, I think the nonprofit side of thing has certainly helped prop up in the meantime while other things hopefully get established and kind of move in that direction.
It's definitely a thriving pool of talent to pick from. So we need some cultivators.
No doubt.
You're doing a little bit of that with some vinyl pressing. I mean, that's
Absolutely.
I feel like that's a very important part of the process.
Well, when I talk about that angle with people, to me, it seems very seamless. Like some of the same passions that drove me through OZ, I've found outlets for in the vinyl thing, just like we were talking about. In a day where musicians are kind of short on revenue streams, right?
Right.
And so in this moment where everyone has listens on their phone and stuff like that, while there's discovery that happens, and it's probably important that they exist in some of those platforms, that is not a revenue stream.
Right.
I mean, it's more PR than I would say a revenue stream is. And what I think a lot of artists have found is the current scenario where due to social media and things like Bandcamp and all that, artists are probably more closely connected to their fans than they've ever been, right? They have direct contact, they can put stuff out there, they can make that connection. And so I think for an artist who has cultivated their fan base a little bit, vinyl starts making a lot of sense.
Right.
Because, I think back in the day, the idea would be like, hey, I made this record, now I need a distributor to put into the record stores, and so now you're dealing with wholesale and stuff like that. But a lot of the projects that we do now, especially for local artists, I mean, those are getting sold from the bandstand, those are getting sold online, and they're getting that retail piece. And I think when you start factoring in how the project comes about, and if they can, control their cost in a way, they can create some really good margins.
Yeah.
By then turning around and selling that thing that was, $6 or $7 cost per unit and getting $25 or $30 for it.
Right.
And I think that can really add a lot to to their career path, as they're kind of planning out, like, okay, how many gigs do I have to have?
Right.
How does this
Well,
have to happen?
once we removed something physical from the music, it ruined
Sure.
the business. It became more of a marketing tool, meaning the music, than the product.
Right.
And then you turn yourself into other products, which once you get your fan base, and that's how you make your money. Before, the music was the product.
Right.
So I've told multiple artists, go back to your trunk sale. I mean,
Sure.
I feel like, and it's great sometimes to have this big, wide body of pool of fans of 6 billion people to impress around the world. It's great, right? But I feel like it also can blind you to what's in front of you because you're trying to figure out 6 billion people
Right.
instead of trying to figure out 600 in your town or right around you. And those 600 would build a career more than the 6 billion
Sure.
at that moment. And you need a big marketing budget to reach the 6 billion. So otherwise, you're just a needle in the haystack.
Well, I think you've already seen a lot of that just in how those services, the streaming services and stuff, have kind of shaped the music itself. I mean, the less interest in actually producing like a fully realized album
Right.
and just releasing a track, right? Because you
Right.
got to stay current and you got to be constantly having stuff in the fire and stuff like that. So yeah, so I think it's it creates some less than great habits for artists.
Yeah, well-
because they're just constantly trying to exist in that medium. Where, like you said, if you just spent more time cultivating those fans who are already there for you,
Yeah.
and you're in touch with them, then like that can really be what you lean on.
And having something physical, even if it's a T-shirt with a scan code for a download, just attaching the music to something physical.
Sure.
But even radio shaped how artists produce music by the 3:30 rule.
Right.
I mean, Stairway to Heaven would never play right now, if it wasn't already famous.
That's true.
And I think now it's 2:45. I don't even think it's 3:30 anymore.
Right.
So I think what Drake said, you only get paid for 45 seconds. So I mean, I think all of these things have shaped the way you produce music and has probably tamed it down and dumbed it down a lot. But that's where I love New Orleans, because the jazz has never gotten dumbed down.
Right. Well, and I think, like when I try to explain this to people, because obviously even to this day, when I'm telling people like what I do, they're like, oh, like, is that a real, it's like, okay, let me start from the beginning.
Santa is real.
Right. But, I always tell people, like, anytime you have a movement, like, streaming, billions and billions of people participating in that. So anytime you have a movement in one direction like that, you're usually going to have some sort of blowback coming back the other way. And I think, people who are now feeling more attached to that tactile experience and having that physical product, that would be that blowback.
Right.
But if that is, 2 to 3% of the market, it's still a ginormous market share.
Right.
Of people who are like feeling like buying vinyl is a good thing to do on a variety of levels.
Absolutely.
And I think, it also speaks to the fact that I think I think fans want to support artists, but they don't always know how.
No, 100%.
And so like the vinyl just
100%.
represents that piece, right?
It juggled everything when you remove the physical. Now that, like, I don't even know how to attach myself to an artist. If I hadn't have that physical moment of going to the store and buying something and reading something and getting involved, I have less care about it if I read something online or just a quote or hear a song. Like, I don't dive in. Right. Before I'd spend hours at the store listening on their headphones trying to figure out what I'm taking home.
Right.
And in the end, I'd end up listening to all kinds of people's music, and it endeared you in a way to it.
Definitely.
So yeah, I think fans are wanting that again. So we did and actually we went on Murph's show. We produced a project here, a rock album, for a band called More October, and they're like I like to say like an emo Deftones, but they're a little harder rock, punk rock band here, all all local guys here, early 20s. But that scene evidently is cassette tapes.
Yeah.
Is really big right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, where are you playing it? I mean, because vinyl, I know I can play. Well, I haven't seen a cassette tape player in a long time.
I would say at this point it's probably easier to get a cassette player than a CD player, though.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Probably, you're right. Well, what's the process of doing a vinyl? Because I know that there's some things you have to do specific, like a certain mix, and
Sure.
And so tell me a little bit about the process.
So basically, when somebody comes to us, in most cases, what's happening is they're submitting to us their mastered tracks. And usually the engineer has taken care of mastering for vinyl, which has some slightly different, ceilings and floors than you would your digital streaming master. When those come to us, we actually send those out to a lacquer cutter who, is physically cutting those grooves into a lacquer. And the lacquer is then sent to a plating facility. And what the plating facility does is basically creates two metal plates representative of each side of the record. So they use the lacquer to actually create these plates. And then the plates are then sent to us.
Got you.
We are able to adhere the plates to our machine. And then that stamping motion is actually us making the records, the manufacturing happening right there.
Gotcha.
So, there's a couple of pieces that we have to outsource because we don't have a lacquer cutter on site, and lacquer cutting had kind of started to go away for a little while. And now that records are back, it's like we need more lacquer cutters. So I think you have a lot of engineers who are probably doing some apprenticeships and trying to figure out lacquer cutting just because there is a demand there.
That's awesome.
The plating facility stuff, obviously, we don't do that on site. So we work with there's a couple of places around the country that do that kind of work.
That's probably your main cost, is getting all that set up, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the initial cost for vinyl is some one-time stuff, whether you're pressing 100 records or 1,000 records or whatever.
Right.
Like, you still have to get a lacquer cut. You still have to get plates made and stuff like that. So, yeah, those are some of the upfront costs that exist regardless. And then, of course, we outsource some of the printing. When we first got started, or when I first got started over at the press, we were really into the idea of like, let's source as much locally as we can. And that's, just talking about music industry, like that's some of the hurdles that we've had really run into. Like, there's not a printer locally who's has the capacity to do record jackets, right, or covers or something like that. There's also not really there's not a close by plating facility. There's not there's not necessarily a lacquer cutter, within a couple of 100-mile radius or anything like that. So, those pieces are just parts of the puzzle, and you just have to source them out best you can and figure out kind of what works best for you. But then ultimately all those pieces end up showing back up to our plant. And then once we actually press the record, then we take all the packaging material, we assemble the product according to the client's specs, and then make it available, whether we're shipping it out to them to some faraway place, or, we're calling up somebody who lives right on the other side of St. Claude and say, hey, your records are ready, come pick them up. And then local artists in most cases will just come and pick them up. And that is a real boon to have here locally for any artist, is having manufacturing in your backyard.
Right.
Because, for people who might not realize, records are heavy. Right. And so shipping records is pricey. Right. And for some people who might be cobbling together just enough to get the record pressed, that last $500-600 that are going to be needed to ship it from some faraway place, that might be a bridge too far, right? And so maybe, in our heads, we hope that, this is allowing more people to utilize the plan and to make records and to try it out, because they're able to eliminate some of that cost.
Yeah. Do you see it on an uptick, people pressing records?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
for sure. I mean, I think, because just like what we were talking about, I think it's becoming a revenue stream for artists that they're like, oh, okay, like I can press 300-400 records, and if I can move those, I mean, then that that really will pump in some extra money into my thing. And then I also think that you have a bigger interest in from fans about having these kind of things. It's like the model today now for a lot of record pressing. Some of it is kind of built on like this scarcity model, where it's like there's the limited edition color variants, and there's all these kind of things, ways for people to kind of participate. to show that they're a fan or they're the biggest fan or whatever.
Right.
So I think a lot of cases like people enjoy that, and then posting it online. I got one of the 100 whatever
Absolutely.
copies and stuff
Well,
like that.
I think
So
Wu-Tang was one of the most successful ones that did, right?
one of one.
One of one, and it sold for millions, didn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, that's one way to make yourself valuable.
For sure. I mean, I don't know if I'd recommend that to any up and coming artists to just do one copy of your record.
But I still thought it was genius.
No, for sure. For sure. And I think it plays into the exact same thing we're talking about. It's like, there was a I guess there was a survey, maybe it was like 2 years ago at this point, that kind of referenced the percentage of people who are currently buying records who don't have turntables.
Right.
And I think, initially people were kind of up in arms, like, what is this about? But once again, I think it just shows that like
it's the poster.
There's value in it, even if you're not listening to it.
It's the poster on your wall now.
Exactly.
It's the man. I was here. I was there. Experienced it, and this is what I brought home with me.
And people are showing that by participating and buying the record, and even if they know that that's not going to be a thing, they know that they're supporting that artist. In a lot of cases, those transactions are happening directly between the artist and the fan.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's an important piece.
I mean, just to do the numbers, I mean, let's just say you sold 300 records at $20. It's at $6,000, right?
Yeah.
So it would take you about 1 million streams in Spotify
No doubt.
to make you $6,000. So if you did the numbers, I think it's worth pushing to 300.
Without a doubt.
And
so, I mean, I think, that's a big part of what we do is, it's almost like it comes from like an educational standpoint. It's like kind of talking them through the very points that we're discussing right now. Like, where's the value at? It's definitely one of those businesses because of some of those upfront costs where the more records you would press, then the cheaper your unit cost would be, right? But, that has a ceiling, right?
Absolutely.
Like nobody wants to have boxes, a whole wall of boxes behind them, of records that aren't necessarily moving. So really kind of identifying where that sweet spot is, what makes the most sense for them. That matters because in most cases, like they're being very budget conscious as it is. And so they need to kind of find that sweet spot of, okay, like this is enough for me to acquire, whatever financial piece, but it's also not like stretching me so thin to get it done that it's putting me in a bad way.
Right.
And so a lot of times, it's that kind of information. It's talking to them about like, a lot of, we've had a lot of situations, especially early on, where people were like, hey, we put out this record. I mean, we put out this CD back in 2009 and I want to put it to record. It's like, okay, great. It's okay. Well, that CD runtime is 72 minutes. So like, that's not going to fit on a single record. And so like, just kind of showing people like, hey, there's like some different nuances to like figure out. Another one is like the actual, when everybody's submitting artwork to us, and everyone's got the label, the jacket figured out and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of people don't think about the center labels.
Right.
And it's like, those need to, those are a design piece that should inform the jacket and should all kind of be like tied in. It should not be like just some afterthought that has a list of song titles on it.
Right.
And so like getting people to think about, oh yeah, I need to, that's a piece of the puzzle that like I can't just like let drop.
Absolutely. Or the story inside.
The insert, right? The pictures, whatever the ephemera, might require and stuff. And so, telling the story of that record, the thank yous, all that kind of
All
stuff.
that stuff, yeah.
That's the stuff that, like you were mentioning earlier, used to go home, throw the record on, and pour over all that stuff, and learn who the producer was, and learn all those things. And that kind of started to go away a little bit. I think now you're seeing a more interest in having that information present.
Yeah, well, I also think it has to do a little bit with people starting to come back to reality on out of social media, in a sense, was realizing how detrimental it is on staying on it constantly and getting back a little bit more into the real world of doing things, and that's sitting down and listening to a record. I'm assuming you have vinyls, huh?
Oh my God, yes, yeah. I mean, my journey with records certainly started as a just a fan and just a enthusiast, buying records wherever I can, estate sales, garage sale, wherever I would see records.
Well, so what do you think would be your favorite vinyl you've ever pressed? Because I know you listen to them.
Oh geez, that I've ever pressed.
Yeah.
We've gotten to do we've been doing the Tips subscription, the Tipitina's record club, the
Yeah.
subscription service stuff, and I really love kind of where they're at with it in terms of their approach has been like not only unearthing stuff from their own archives of the club, bands that have played there years and years ago, but also finding projects that had at this point become out of print, critically hard to find, like old, New Orleans, like really lineage type New Orleans records that had just become hard to find. And, they're not on streaming services. And so then this issue becomes like, man, like at some point that goes away, right?
Right.
Like, and so they've been able to get rights to a lot of projects and reissue those in a way so that now people can hear them again. And there's one particular project, it's an old Eddie Bo record, and it is phenomenal. And it had gotten to the point where, if you found one online, it was probably going to run you $1,500, $2,000.
Right.
And so that becomes very prohibitive for people to experience that music, right? Because like not everybody's looking to drop that kind of coin on a record. But now all of a sudden it's available through the subscription service for, much less.
Right.
30, $40, whatever. But like, those kind of instances have become like really interesting to me, and that's kind of bringing it back and allowing people to experience that stuff again. And I before stepping into the role with the record press, me and a business partner of mine, we had started a label, and we were actually pressing. We were some of the earliest clients at the record press because when we heard that they were doing that there was a record press locally, we got super excited. Went over there and met the two founders. And, we were pressing all of our stuff there. And so, kind of seeing it from that angle too, like, okay, this is a big step for us, like when people talk about the need for infrastructure and music economy and all that kind of stuff, like, manufacturing really closes the loop, it allows a lot of stuff to stay right here in house. Right. And so, seeing that kind of play out with some of those, whether it be the Tip subscription records or, some of these, some of the local artists, Frenchman street bands who are out there hustling all the time, and having them like kind of participate, those are kind of the good feelings, right? The advocacy aspect that we're talking about, to me, like that's where it really hits home.
That's awesome. Well, it's kind of funny because it's almost like going backwards in time with the audio.
Sure.
And like the Dolby room, which is what we're sitting in right now, is like going the opposite way. So like how I try to explain this process is like when we went from cassette to CD and everything had to be remixed and remastered. It's kind of the same process.
Absolutely.
So, but I love that music is going back to not only something physical, but something emotional, and vinyl is just such a good feeling. Like this, it's warm.
Absolutely.
Digital kind of made things a little different.
No, absolutely.
So I'm really happy to see that it's kind of progressing that way.
It's it's funny kind of because in the place that it exists now, it's, you've had so much changes from when records were starting to get put out back in the 50s, 60s. And as much as change as you've seen, the technology itself has more or less stayed the same. I mean, you have some more bells and whistles, you have more computer integration with the equipment, and you have stuff like that. But for the most part, it is still that tried and true process that they were kind of sorting out way back when. Right.
Yeah. And, I mean, some of the, this is all new, digital stuff, but in the other room, in the A room, I mean, I've got, 1073s from the 70s. I've got LA2, I got the old classic analog gear. That stuff hasn't changed,
Right.
People still record through that,
Yeah. I mean, if anything, it's like today's, the format for the hardware, especially from the listening end, has changed a lot. If you go, for better, I'll preface this with for better or for worse. If you go on Amazon and punch in turntable, you could probably find 20, 30 options that are like under $60. Now, that's not necessarily a great thing.
No, right.
But it just kind of goes to show you that, like, as this thing has started to make its impact again, people are scrambling to, you got to figure out players. Like, it's like all these things have to all of a sudden catch back up with something that has started to kind of go away, whether it be the lacquer cutting, intention of like, people actually learning that skill, making sure that players are available and around and stuff like that. So all those pieces are now kind of coming back into vogue because they're necessary for this thing to kind of keep going.
Well, maybe we can get an AI 3D printer to start making the lacquer stuff, and we can do it all in house in town. Right?
Absolutely, I would love that. Please get at me if you have a 3D printer for sure.
Come on, tech companies, make it work. But that's awesome. Well, before we end here, please tell us a little bit about your show on WWOZ and what you play and when we can listen and all that stuff.
Okay, so actually just knocked off the air a couple of hours ago. It's every Thursday from 6 to 9 a.m. I'm kind of an early riser, so it kind of fits for me. And January will mark 20 years that I've been doing that slot.
Wow.
It's it's called the morning set because every day like a different host has that slot. I think it's widely considered like a jazz slot, although I think hosts are able to push the envelope in some different directions and help try to kind of tie all that stuff in. I think that one of the things that OZ has always kind of had to do is really balance the idea of not only celebrating the amazing history and the lineage of all these great players and stuff going back, but also balancing that against like we're in real time with like a thriving music scene right now,
right.
And those people need the attention, the light shined on them and all that kind of stuff. So really kind of balancing both of those ideas. And so, for me, I love the classic jazz and old Blue Note sides and stuff like that. That stuff is great. But I also like to make sure I'm showcasing more progressive sounds, whether that be local or otherwise. And also kind of like trying to connect the dots as to, where some of this music kind of intersects with what your particular idea of jazz may be. I think the minute you start trying to, keep the umbrella small and say all the things that aren't jazz,
you can't pigeonhole it.
Right. It's like you're losing out on fans who don't necessarily know that they like jazz. But if you said, well, actually, if you listen to this, that's kind of connected here and here. And it's like, oh, well, maybe I do.
Right.
And I think, for New Orleans, it's an important piece of the puzzle because we celebrate the birthplace of jazz so much. But that only has real teeth as long as like jazz is like a continually growing piece of the puzzle. Like if it just becomes like some artifact in a time capsule, like that itself doesn't lend itself to like bringing in new listeners and stuff like that. So I think it's an important role to play to kind of balance the old with the new. And I try to do that on my show just to kind of show that there's a wide range of stuff that could all fall under those categories.
Absolutely. No, and I love what you guys have done over there and just kept it non-corporate and kept the heart of WWOZ, which I feel like has kept a lot of musicians heard that wouldn't have been heard.
No, absolutely. I mean, by far, when you get a call in the studio and you just played like some local artist, and then the phone rings and some guy's like, "Who is that? I want to go buy it right now."
Right.
Like there is no better compliment than that. It's like you're directly impacting an artist locally and exposing someone else outside to their music. And that's a hard thing to find for musicians.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate what you do.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us today. I appreciate the conversation, man.
For sure. It went by so fast.
It did go by fast. Do you want to share any socials or?
I'm out there on, obviously the at New Orleans Record Press on Instagram. I'm just under my name on Instagram. I still mess around on Twitter a little bit, as not so much. Instagram's probably a better place to catch me. But yeah.
I got you. Awesome. Well, go get your vinyls pressed because you need to attach something physical to your music if you want to make money nowadays.
That's right.
So anyway, thanks again, and thank you guys for joining us on the Elation Podcast today. And if you'd like to experience more, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.